Say it, though.
Welcome to the 2.0 Grandma Show, a show for grandmas, about grandmas, and by a grandma.
Hey.
I am Dr. Marsha Carter McLean, your host, and I'd like to welcome my special guest, Mr. Marcus Rather.
Thank you.
I know you all catch that Rather. I know what you're thinking. Is that Dan Rather's son?
Yeah. Still trying to find out the relation there.
I know that's right. Well, Marcus, thank you. We did another episode earlier, and I want us to make sure, because this topic, financial planning, financial literacy, financial wellness, as we call it at Grandma's 2.0, is a huge topic. It's so broad, and just having the initial conversation with you, I've realized now there's so many different components and pieces to this, and there's no cookie cutter, no one size fits all kind of approach.
Right.
So what I want us to do now is I want us to talk a little bit about, we want to do a few more case scenarios, right?
Yeah.
And then some kind of general things. Like
Awesome.
You told us about some of the products that your organization offers, Cetera. And you also told us that you were a licensed financial professional.
Right.
So we have that. And so I want grandmas to actually, follow up with you, right? To say, oh yeah, I'm thinking about this. I heard you, on the Grandma's 2.0 show, whatever. And I really have some questions about this. And so we shared how people can get in touch with you and all of that. And so I think we've got your background and all of that. So now I want to have a few questions about like short-term and long-term goals.
Awesome.
Let's start there. Okay. So short-term for grandma who really just wants to take care of herself. Not worry about grandkids, just herself, because you know what they say, take care of yourself first. Take care of yourself first. It's like being on an airplane.
Right?
So let's think about that. What could be some short-term things that you might suggest, or
So at least from a financial planning perspective, one of the fundamentals of financial planning truly is a budget. And I know something that I'd say I preach or teach, whatever word I want to use,
or both, right?
for budgeting, because there's there's an emotion behind money, and as I said to you, when I hear grandma, there's a picture, there's something that comes to mind, and when I say budget, there's typically something that comes to mind for other people. And oftentimes, what I first hear when I mention budget, the response is, "Oh well, I know, I got to pay the bills first, responsibilities first, and I should stop spending on these things." And I normally say, "Hold on, it's okay," because remember, there's more to life than just a dollar value, right? There's a lot of life to live, and you should enjoy the fruits of your labor. So if there's anything that I teach fundamentally at the base of every financial plan is the importance of a budget, but understand what that budget means for you. You should have your needs, but it's okay to have your wants and wishes within your budget, right? Now, typically what you can afford.
Thank you. I've been waiting for somebody to say that all my life.
Right, yeah. I mean, but that's true. Like you work hard,
yes.
Right? You work hard for your money. And something that you had mentioned last episode when you say what conversations can grandmas have with their grandchildren or their children is understanding the value of money, because it's your labor that relates to the dollar, right? Something my dad had mentioned, probably not a good analogy here since we're talking about women, but I remember my dad said, I worked 2 hours, right, making $14-15 because he does some part-time work, and I spent that on lunch. So my lunch cost me 2 hours of my time. And if there's anything that you could teach a child starting a professional career is, understand what it means to work for your money, but also think when you're making this purchase, whether it's a need, want, or wish, how much of that time is that take away from the purchase, right? If you're spending $300, did you have to work a whole week in order to get that $300 just to get that one item? Is it worth it, right?
Right.
So budgeting is, I say, a balance between the needs, the wants, and wishes. And make sure that your actions align with your intentions. So if saving is a goal, it's a priority, we know it's important, make sure that's one top priority of the budget, right? We know you have to pay for mortgage or rent. We know you have to pay for utilities, property taxes, whatever the case may be. That falls in the needs. But if your personal care is a high want, right? Hair, nails, makeup, whatever the case may be, you shouldn't rob yourself or deprive yourself of those things. Make sure that within your budget, it fits in alignment with what's most important in your financial goals as well. So the foundation short term, I say, understand the principle of budgeting and find the right balance for what's going to work for you and your goals.
I love that you broke it down. Needs, wants, wishes. Yep. I love that. Needs, wants, wishes. Because now I remember who asked me this question? Someone asked me this question. Oh, my daughter. We were talking about, she just got a new position, and she also has a son who's 20 months old, right? And so, of course, she's thinking about, her thought was, how do you make sure you have enough money to do the things you want to do?
Right.
Like not the needs.
Right.
But the wants.
The wants. Right.
And so she said to me, did you, when we were little, did you get your nails done and all that stuff like you do now?
Right.
I said, no, I painted them myself,
Right.
And she said, well, why? I said, because it was a lot cheaper to do it that way. I said, so when you think about, family budgeting and all that, you got to think about what you can afford and what you can't, and then, what you can do for yourself, the DIY,
right.
And all of those things. And so, but that made me think about that when you said the needs, the wants, and the wishes. Yeah. Right. And I said, but now that I'm pretty much, I don't have any children because all my children are adults.
Are different. Right.
Everything changed, honey. And yes, I'm getting all kinds of stuff. Right.
Loved it.
More wants on the list. And I don't feel guilty. Now, back then, had I done that, I would have felt guilty because I would have felt like, wait a minute, am I really taking, from the household or whatever? So my husband and I, we learned a long time ago that we need to pool our resources together and then talk about these resources. Now, in the first few years of our marriage, we did not do that. And we lived to tell the story, okay? It was not a good story.
I think there's some power in sharing that, truthfully, because I kind of just lost my thought there, but I think there's power in sharing that story because each phase of life, you're going to have different responsibilities. And you got to make sure that, I'll say as women, from a man's perspective, being a financial professional, I had to take a moment to really listen to the things that you share with me because there are a lot of roles that women play that oftentimes I overlook. And it's very challenging for me because I know we're going to get into a conversation that talks about some of the challenges that women face. But one of the challenges that you guys face are you wear so many different hats on a day-to-day basis that it's so easy to just overlook your well-being. And I love that you have 8 pillars of wellness because I'm sure one of them either talks about self-care, self-love, sex, so on and so forth. Yes. But with all the responsibilities that women have to face or have to handle, it's very easy to just overlook some of those wants and wishes. So I think in any conversation we have about finance, or if you're having these things, conversation with family, be aware of some of the challenges that you face, right? You guys wear so many more hats than me or as a man would, that your challenges are going to be so unique and different. The approach that you have with financial planning is going to be different as well.
Well, that leads me to this question about, and I agree with you, of course. I agree with you on that. But what I'm thinking about when you said that is, as a woman, we do think about money differently, right? And I can say that from my own perspective. However, I have learned over time that if you take care of your money will take care of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and so, I want to make sure that I know how to stretch my money. I want to make sure that I have some money. I want to make sure that I have a good relationship with money. I'm not scared of money. Now, earlier in my life, I was, because I didn't really know what to do with it. I didn't know how to budget. I was never taught that. But I like to say now I'm self-taught because I figured it out, and I figured out what I can do with, the needs, wants, and wishes. I figured all that out. And I figured out also how to save some so I would have some. So, and those kinds of things. But that doesn't always come easy, especially if we're not talking, like we said earlier, about money to people that matter to us and, grandkids, kids, and all that. And so, but thinking about it from the woman's perspective, there are some risks that we experience that, I want you to kind of share with us, about, something you were talking about earlier. And I really like that because I think it's so important for us to think about it from our perspective. And what is it that we face on a daily basis that would help us understand and better serve ourselves financially?
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that because a few years ago, sorry, I'm looking at my phone because I'm looking at the article. Thank God I was able to find it. But a few years ago, I came across an article that the title was the unique retirement issues facing women. It was from Advisor Perspectives. If anyone wants to look that up on Google, again, is Advisor Perspectives. Title of the article: The Unique Retirement Issues Facing Women. But I'm just going to read off some of the 12 risks. So one, they said women earn less. So it's addressing or acknowledging the wage gap. Women live longer. They have fewer years of earned income. They start investing later. They're typically less confident about their personal finance and investing skills. They're less aggressive investors, are less satisfied with the current financial advisor industry. Number 8 is are more likely to bear the physical, emotional, and financial brunt of the sandwich generation. So caring for both children and elderly parents. Number 9 is if divorced, they face specific challenges and obstacles. Number 10 they are less likely to remarry after a gray divorce. So divorce over the age of 50 or becoming widowed later in life, they're less likely to remarry. Number 11 are more subject to elder abuse. And number 12 are statistically likely to die single, divorced, or widowed, likely attributing to that number 2 that they live longer. So reading through that list of 12, again, when I read the article, I couldn't help but think of, again, my mom, my grandmother, my aunts, just about every woman in my family, because number 1 earned less compared to my dad. My mom made less. In terms of living longer, thank God they're both alive, so I don't have much of a testimony there. But my grandmothers outlived my grandfathers. You know, one grandfather died at 49, the other died around 73. Both of my grandmothers are 85 and older, so they are seeing that living longer, right? Have fewer years of earned income. My mom took some years off of work compared to my dad that's been working every year since he started his professional career. Starting investing later, mom had a later start. So did my grandparents compared to my grandfathers. Less confident about their personal finance and investing skills, less aggressive investors.
Now let's talk about that one, about less confident about investing skills. Why do you think that is?
I believe that's most from what I've experienced and what I've heard is mostly because they defer those responsibilities to their significant other. Some of it is just pure literacy gap, but a lot of it is delegating responsibilities. And it's not to say that women do not handle the finances in their household, because even sometimes I find that women do handle the bills, the management of the money, balancing the checkbook, so on and so forth. But when it comes to making those investment or major decisions, oftentimes they defer that completely to their significant other. So some of that is because of the lack of knowledge, and then some of it is just lack of confidence because they have confidence in someone else to make that decision. And understanding those risks, whenever I connect with a family or a woman individually, I do my best to make sure that they're aware of these challenges, because again, you're wearing a lot of hats, you have a lot of responsibilities. And one thing to best, again, plan around is like being aware of the risks that you face and taking inventory of where your situation is, so we can help overcome those through, again, efficient and effective planning.
So if I'm a woman in that category of what did you call it? The gray
area.
Right.
So they're saying
the gray area.
50 or older.
Yeah, 50 or older, and my hair is turning gray, and and I just lost my husband, and now I'm responsible for my own finances because I allowed him to do that. Like I said, oh no, you take care of that.
Right.
Ooh.
It's very scary because I'll say I've worked with a few widows, and I've seen it firsthand where I'm excited to be able to work with them, to empower them and give them the confidence that they feel that they lack. Because one great decision is truly working with the right professional. And not to toot my own horn, but I commend them on that and saying, one great decision that you're making is that you're looking for the proper counsel, you're looking for the proper advice, and don't feel ashamed to ask questions. When I have a lot of people say they're thankful that I have a lot of patience when I'm connecting with them or regurgitating information that they say, look, I've heard this 1,000 times. Can you explain it one more time? I don't mind that, right? Because I want them to feel empowered.
That's wonderful. That's a really good selling point, not to detract from what you're saying, but just having somebody to listen and to really, really listen, not just say, oh, yeah, but here's what I want to show you, but listen to their needs and where they are, like you said, meeting them where they are at that moment in their life. And then, a lot of women are, like I said, reinventing themselves, living after husbands have passed or after divorce. And so now they're in charge of all of that for themselves. Right. And, and they need someone that they can trust, and someone that will definitely listen. So that's key. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And then help them plan what they need to do moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that one too, there was another one you said that I thought was pretty interesting too, or maybe I wrote that. Oh, a divorced grandma.
Mm-hmm.
Divorce is another issue that sometimes women face, and then they're by themselves and they have to take on the responsibility of that themselves.
Yeah, because I see that firsthand. Like I said, I have a client that lives in Virginia Beach. I love working with her. Oh my gosh, I love connecting with her. But again, being aware of that risk and actually watching it firsthand, she got divorced about 7 years ago. And now she's getting to a point where she's able to sustain a comfortable standard of living. But coming out of a divorce, it's expensive, right? And not only adjusting to the change in the lifestyle, going through the breakup, going through divorce emotionally, but now financially coming from two income household where you were likely able to save a lot more or afford a certain lifestyle. Now you have to pay a mortgage or a rent by yourself, and you had to refinance this, and you probably have more debt. And now what you were expecting to come into the household for retirement is now based on one person. It changes everything, right?
Yeah.
So
I had a friend who said that it took him about 5 to 7 years to recoup after the divorce.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, the wife must have taken everything, but he didn't say that, of course.
Right.
But I was just thinking that, But now that you say what you're saying, it doesn't matter what the gender, because it could happen either way.
Either way. Right.
Yeah. So what's the advice? What should women do? Not saying that you prepare to get a divorce. It's like you're having a prenup. It's like this is not going to work. So that's not what. I'm saying.
But if you look at, I don't know the accurate statistic, but if you look at top reasons for a divorce, money is generally top 5, if not number 2, I believe.
Yes.
So that speaks to either a behavior behind money or communication behind money that creates that separation or that division. So if you are someone that's married, make sure you're having healthy financial conversations with your significant other, right? Make sure there's a lot of trust that you can build between one another, having common goals, similar interests, or just understanding what works best for you. Because I'm not saying every married couple needs to do everything jointly in finance. Some married couples work best keeping things separate.
Yeah, well, there was an article in Oprah magazine some years ago now, and I'm going to tell you what it said. It said that a woman should have her own money.
Yeah.
Right? Separate from the household money, her own money. And especially, I think this was an article, something about women at 40 or something. At 40, women should have their own money. Money that they set aside, that they then grow on their own. That's different from and should not be dabbled into by the household.
Yeah.
Right.
And I can't fully disagree with that. I'm not a marriage counselor either.
Right.
I'm just going to be treading that line very thinly.
But,
I can't disagree with that because I think it makes sense. End of the day, just make sure, communication is important between significant others in finance and the marriage.
Yeah. So tell me now, what about, and I think I don't know that we talked about this one, nursing home, long-term care kinds of situations.
Man, oh man. I don't know how much time we have. I'm trying to keep it brief. So when addressing conversations around long-term care, first is the conversation. So whenever I'm connecting with someone to discuss long-term care within their financial plan, one of the important questions is to ask their experience. Not everyone has experienced someone that has needed it, but I find that most people have. So actually, I'm a product of that. My grandmother, my Nana, is now being provided care for through my mom. So she falls within that sandwich generation risk that you heard me mention earlier. And I got to just blame it on lack of knowledge. They didn't know, right? At the time, and I also think the expectation was I took care of my kids. In retirement, they're going to take care of me. And now we're seeing that our kids are not always equipped to handle certain responsibilities of making sure they bathe you, making sure you eat, you take your medication. Because my mom and my Nana fight just to get my Nana to do certain things. And it puts a lot of stress on my mom. So although, yes, family's going to do what they need to do, family isn't always equipped to handle certain responsibilities. Right. So one conversation I do typically have in financial planning is this something that you've experienced, right? And depending on your game plan, how long of a retirement that you are planning for, is this a risk that you may face? And if it is a risk that you may face, what level of care would you like to have? Because on the far right-hand side, I'd say far right, far left. Far right is saying you may have to go to a facility, right? Whether it's a full nursing home facility, semi-private room, a completely private room. You just want the full care best money can buy, or prayerfully not qualifying for Medicaid or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then the far left-hand side is saying, well, I just want to make sure that my family can provide the care that I need, but it's not a financial strain on them. Somewhere in the middle, you have assisted nursing, nursing home care, whatever the case may be. So it's important to understand what level of care that you would like to have, God forbid you need it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final step is, okay, if that's the level of care that you want, how can we project what that expense will be?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Nursing home costs today are easily $7,000 to $9,000 a month.
God.
There are facilities all throughout this area, right? I know one that I'm familiar with, Commonwealth Senior Living. But I believe the cost for that facility can somewhere be between $7,000 to $9,000 a month. So we're saying significantly more than just your mortgage. And not everyone can control what their health dictates to the level of need that they have.
Mm-hmm.
But depending on the level of care that you need or will want to have, we need to make sure we have the proper resources available to cover that cost. So whether it is insurance, whether it's money that you currently have saved and invested or anything along those lines, we got to make sure we have the right resources in place.
Wow, that's a lot. Okay, and the cost is so astronomical, it's ridiculous. But now let's talk about this issue, investing. Okay. Before we do that, let's take a break, and then we'll come right back, and then we'll talk about investing. See what your advice is about that.
Love it.
All right, so I think the time has come for us to talk about investing. Okay, so I'm a grandma, and I want to invest just to take care of myself. I've already set aside some things for my grandchildren. Like I said, I just turned over what I was saving for my children and say that because they all got college scholarships as athletes. So Love praise God.
Hey, yes.
So we saved it for the grandkids. So now we just want to make sure that we're taken care of. Yes. Right. So, I've always been afraid to invest. When I say invest, I'm talking about the stock market and stuff like that, right? Always been a little intimidated. So I asked my children about it. Oh, well, all you need to do is get a Robinhood, I think it is. And I'm like, okay, so, but what do I do when I get there? So I downloaded the app and all that. And then I felt some kind of way because I didn't want to tap my credit card account my bank account, I think, or whatever.
Yeah.
So please help me out, Marcus. What can I do here? Because I really do want to invest, but I'm still a little nervous about it.
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, starting out with investing through platforms like Robinhood, Acorns, E-Trade, Scottrade, Fidelity, those are outstanding platforms. I'm not going to say one is better than the other, but those are great platforms in today's time because they've decreased the barriers to entry. It's very easy for you to set up an account and just get started, whether it's pennies on the dollar, major money, whatever the case may be. It's very easy to just simply start and just have some money starting to work for you. I find the challenge is mostly the behavior and, again, the knowledge behind disciplined investing. In many cases, it's not what you invest in. It's really the decisions that you make of when to buy and when to sell. So one thing that I learned starting out in the industry is if you look at the S&P 500, that's just the one of the major indices that most people will invest in, top 500 companies throughout the United States. And
the apples of the world.
Basically, right?
Okay.
And you've heard stories of loss in the market, right? And from an individual company standpoint, yes, a company can go bankrupt, they can go out of business. But if you look at the diversification of 500 companies, can you ever think of a time where the value of that index touched zero?
So in other words, all those companies.
I'm not saying.
What do you mean?
Out of 500 companies, for you to lose all of your money,
right. That's
all
what I'm saying.
500 companies have to
just fall out of the
It has to be gone, right? They have to be worth nothing.
And that doesn't make any sense.
Never happened, right? So understand the value of diversification.
That right there is profound, right? Because now you made me feel so much better because I was thinking I wasn't looking at it that way. Oh my God.
To lose everything.
To lose everything would
Right.
mean that every one of those companies
Has
would
to
have
be
to
out of
belly
business.
up.
Right.
Oh my God.
Now that's not absent of saying the value won't change.
Right.
So what we
Right.
also experience is, time periods like the early 2000s where you had the dot-com bubble burst and you had Enron, MCI WorldCom, and, you had global issues between terrorist attacks and all the other things. And then you had the global financial crisis, which I think people still perfectly remember, because right now there's a large fear that we may re-experience that again.
Right, with this the bank situation.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
So a lot of people had some major exposure to certain things that weren't appropriate for their investment time frame, whatever the case may be. But if you look at studies and if you look at reports, if someone stayed invested, if they chose not to sell or take the money out of the market, they would have regained or actually be in a better position today had they never taken that money out during that time period. So there's clearly a disconnect between the emotions behind investing and the logic behind investing. We know the best time to buy. If you're buying something, when's the best time to buy it? It's when it's on sale.
When it's on, right.
When it's at the lowest point to buy it.
Right.
So investing, theoretically, you would say, well, the best time to buy it is when it's cheaper.
When it's low, right.
But when you see your value $10,000, $20,000 less, your emotional reaction is, let me get my money out.
Yeah.
Right. Versus when the market is high, when it's at its most expensive, our emotion says, well, things are going good. Let's keep it in. Let's throw some more money in. It's money to make.
Right.
That's the most expensive time to buy it.
So what? Let me make sure I'm interpreting what you're saying, because as you're speaking this foreign language to me, no, don't be sorry, because these are things that we need to understand. And so it takes away the fear, right? If we understand it better. And that's my goal, is to help grandmas really understand what all this means. And so if, for example, if I have my money in these 500, companies, and one of them or two of them or 20 of them, it's still okay. Right. And if there's one, let's just say I even bought one stock and it went low. Now, because it's low, I have $10 over here. I can buy a whole lot more shares
of that one,
and then
company.
And wait for it to go back up.
Right,
is what you're saying. Oh my God, yes, yes.
So I do want to differentiate the difference between the risk of a single stock versus a fund.
Right. But I had to do that for my own head.
No, that's perfect. No, you got it perfect. Okay. But just for people listening, because I'm very particular, I don't want to be misleading, misguiding.
Right.
Understand there is a difference between investing in an individual stock of one company versus a fund that's diversified amongst hundreds of different companies, right? So there is a difference. But conceptually, you got it on the head, right? The best time to buy in is when the value has dropped, because if you're believing that the value will grow back, now you have more shares at a more expensive value. So that basic principle is very basic. I mean, like you said, you think of it as like, no duh. I buy it when it's cheap.
Right.
And if I'm trying to flip it or sell it, I want to sell it as the most valuable thing. No different for real estate.
Yes.
But emotion leads us to make a different decision. Emotion leads us to say, well, the best time to buy it is when it's doing good. The best time to sell it is when it's doing bad. So there's a disconnect. So if you have a long-term strategy, and I say long-term for anyone that's young, that's looking to accumulate, or even people entering into retirement that's planning for a long and healthy retirement, understand the value that time has to allow your money to grow. Because even though we may experience a bad year, a bad 2 or 3 years, your time to regain or buy back into the market for growth is more valuable, right? So buy low, sell high would be the basic fundamental that I say.
And that is a really good basic information or something for people to hold on to, so that it makes so much sense to them. And just breaking it down to that, that's beautiful, because again, I was afraid, because I was looking at it from, well, first off, what does all this mean? And somebody said, oh, well, let me show you the report. Well, that doesn't mean anything to me. Break it down to me in words so I can understand what you're saying and what this means. But yeah, just thinking about it from the episode, when it's low, then you buy more if you're already in. Right. When it's high, then you just sit and wait, because it's going to change. But never, ever, ever has it historically. 500 of those companies have never just said belly up, all 500 of those companies.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I thought that was interesting once it kind of hit me as I was looking at a chart. We've seen a year. We've seen time periods where it's dropped massively. Like stock market has crashed, right? 30, 40, 50%, but it's never touched zero.
Right.
And again, if you have the time to allow your money to grow back,
right,
typically the next year, the next 2 or 3 years, the opportunity for gain is so tremendous after a crash that generally the bad decision to make is selling at the bottom, right?
And what is this whole thing about compound interest?
Oh man, what's that, seventh, eighth wonder of the world?
Right.
That's, again, that I attribute compound interest to, again, the value of time. So there's this rule of 72. You may have heard it. It's you take 72 and you divide it by a number, and say that number is your rate of return. That tells you how long it takes for your money to grow. So
okay, now wait, do the whole math problem.
So let's say we average 10%, just for round numbers. So 72 divided by 10 is 7.2. So that tells you your money will double in 7.2 years.
Oh, in 7.2 years.
Right. So if you had $10,000 and say that just averaged 10%, 7 years later your 10 is worth 20. Right. Without you adding any extra money. Right. But where it compounds is that now you have 20. 7 years later, that 20 is now worth 40 because it's doubled again. 7 years later, that 40 is worth 80. So compounding interest is basically, again, you have the interest that's added to your value. So if I start off with $10, the interest is $1. The next year I have 11. Well, whatever the growth is on that 11 now grows even more. So that's the theory of compounding interest. Your interest is added to what you put in, and it's going to continue to grow based on your ability to reinvest and add on to it.
Oh, I love that. Ooh. Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Oh, yeah. But again, the difference between that result oftentimes is found in the decisions. You can average 10, but 10 is an average, meaning
it could be higher, it could be lower, it could be higher.
But the average at the end of the day is 10. Well, if you see that 10 is based on, did you stay invested through the highs and the lows to get that end result, right?
Okay. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful formula there. Yeah, and just to keep focused on that, I think is where people need to do. So, and the reason I brought that up is because someone was telling me about, oh, well, if you just put your money in and you think about compound interest, and so then they even told me to go to a website and use a compound calculator.
Yeah.
And oh my God.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and they had me put in different amounts, and I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, and I was just like, what does that really mean then? Yeah. So that's pretty phenomenal.
It's outstanding.
Yeah. Oh my God. So we've talked about investments, we've talked about long-term care, we've talked about the risk. Is there anything else that you think you need to kind of share with us that would benefit grandmas, you know, about this whole financial wellness thing?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So there's typically like a structure that I have when it's like a PDF that I share with anybody that's completely new to the conversation, or maybe even, you know, vaguely familiar. But it's what I call the steps of building a financial plan. So the fundamentals was the budget, understanding what's coming in and going out, finding that balance of needs, wants, and wishes. But the second step isn't investing. The second step is actually insurance. It's the protection of what you're looking to build or what you currently have. And I don't believe we've really talked much about it, but I say life insurance is a valuable and critical piece of financial planning, because that's really where the legacy is created. I know we've talked about savings, we talked about investing. A lot of that we can't fully control, right? We can't control the rate of return. We can't control how long we have to save because we don't know how long we're going to be alive. So the best way to leave a legacy or to protect or create a legacy is through life insurance. More than just simply covering final expenses, which I find is a common thing amongst our culture specifically. It does help so you don't put a family in debt,
right?
But there's always room to leave a legacy through having adequate life insurance, whether it's term, whole life, permanent, whatever type of variation. End of the day, if you pass away, your family is only concerned about the money that you want to leave to them, and the money that they need to sustain their standard of living. So I'm not going to say which one is better, because they all have their place. I believe in all of them, but life insurance is a valuable and critical piece.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we might have to do another episode, because there's just so much to this financial wellness. It really is. But thank you so much, Marcus, for being here today. I really appreciate it. And Well, we'll have to talk about doing something else for real. The other thing I want to say is you gave us your website. Do you mind doing that one more time for us just to make sure?
Yes.
Okay.
Website Marcus Marcus .ceterainvestors.com. Cetera CETERA investors INV as in Victor ESTORS.com. That is my website. You can find all my information there. My social tags are also through the website, but for Instagram, it's Rather Financial Services. Facebook, Rather Financial Services, or you can just look me up, Marcus Rather. I'm on all of those. And if you're a Twitter fan, Marcus_Rather.
All right. So thank you so much, Marcus. I really appreciate it.
Thank
it was
you.
a lot to try to get into this little bit of time, but I thank you so much for your time today. And grandmas, thank you for listening, and we look forward to the next time. This is the Grandmas 2.0 show, and we're all about grandmas, for grandmas, and by a grandma. Thank you.
Love it.